You ever have a moment where something tiny, like a throwaway joke or a look held a second too long, shifts everything? That happened to me the night I crashed at Ethan's place. He was the kind of guy who made everything look easy. Straight, charming, naturally athletic, without even trying. The kind of dude who posted gym selfies ironically, but you could still tell he liked the way his arms looked in them, and he had that laugh. Deep, unbothered, infectious. He was never mean, never the center of drama. Just Ethan. We met during sophomore year at college, stuck in a miserable intro to statistics class together. I hated numbers. He didn't get them either, but at least he made the class bearable. From there, we just kinda stuck. Late night study sessions turned into weekly drinks, and eventually, we were the kind of friends who could sit on the couch in silence and not have it feel weird. He never cared that I was gay. When I told him, he didn't blink, just asked if I wanted the last slice of pizza and handed me the remote. So when he invited me to crash at his place after his birthday party, I didn't think twice. His apartment was closer, and we were both buzzed enough that an Uber felt like a hassle. It wasn't the first time we'd shared a bed either. His couch sucked, and once we both passed out watching Netflix and woke up practically spooning, nothing had ever happened. Not even close. But that night, something shifted. We got back from the party around 1:30 a.m. He was laughing, kicking off his sneakers, and talking about how someone brought boxed wine like it was still 2009. I dropped onto the bed, fully clothed, just exhausted and buzzed. He disappeared into the bathroom, and when he came back, he was in nothing but gym shorts. That wasn't unusual either. Ethan didn't do pajamas. "Move over," he said, nudging me with his knee before flopping down beside me. We lay there in the dark, both on our backs, the ceiling fan clicking overhead. The room was spinning just slightly. My arm brushed his once, twice, and neither of us pulled away. I stared up, blinking into the shadows, heart a little too fast for how still I was lying. Then he said, "You ever think about how weird it is, sharing a bed with someone?" I turned my head toward him. He didn't look at me, just kept staring at the ceiling. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Like, the closeness. It's kinda intimate, right? But it's not weird because it's sleep." My throat went dry. "Depends who you're sharing with." He let out a breath, almost a laugh. "Yeah, guess so." We fell quiet again. The silence wasn't awkward, but it was loaded. You know that kind of silence? Where the room feels like it's waiting for something to happen? He shifted beside me. The mattress creaked. Then I felt his leg brush against mine. Not accidental this time. "Hey," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Sure. You ever, wonder what it'd be like? With a guy who's never done anything before?" My breath caught. I didn't move. Didn't speak. He finally turned his head, his eyes finding mine in the dark. There was something in his expression. Uncertainty, curiosity, fear. "I mean," he added quickly, "not saying I wanna, just wondering. You ever think about that?" I swallowed. "Yeah, sometimes." He nodded slowly like he was thinking hard about something. Then his hand found mine under the blanket, not grabbing, just resting, our fingers barely touching. And he didn't move it. I didn't either. I didn't breathe for what felt like a full minute. Ethan's hand wasn't moving. His fingers were just barely brushing mine, like a test, a maybe, a dare. The air between us had thickened into something I didn't know how to navigate. I felt my heartbeat everywhere, ears, throat, fingertips, and still, neither of us said a word. "I don't know why I did that," he finally muttered, almost too quietly to hear. He sounded uncertain, like he was waiting for me to laugh or pull away or say something that would hit reset on the moment. But I didn't want to reset. I wanted to stay right there, in that strange humming stillness where maybe things could mean something different. So I turned my palm up, slow, deliberate, and let his hand settle into mine. He flinched like he didn't expect me to actually do it. But he didn't let go. We lay there like that, hands clasped under the blanket, bodies still, breaths gradually sinking. It felt like we'd stepped out of the reality we'd been living in, into some new one neither of us knew the rules to. After a while, I whispered, "You okay?" His thumb moved slightly, tracing a slow, nervous line along my knuckles. "I think so," he said. I don't know what this is." "You don't have to know." He looked at me again. This time, his expression was softer, like something had unraveled inside him, something he hadn't even known he'd been holding tight. I could feel his breath now, shallow and quick. He was close, closer than he'd ever let himself be with me before. That same Ethan I'd known for years, but now, with something raw and unguarded in his eyes. "You ever kissed a straight guy before?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt so surreal to hear him say that. Ethan, of all people. "No," I said. "Not unless you're volunteering." He hesitated, swallowed. Then, after a pause, he nodded once. "Okay." I shifted toward him slowly, giving him every chance to pull back. He didn't. His eyes stayed locked on mine, wide and uncertain but steady. I leaned in, stopping just an inch away. "You sure?" "I don't know," he whispered, "but I want to find out." That was all I needed. The kiss was soft, careful, like touching something you're scared to break. He kissed me back. It wasn't practiced or perfect. It was hesitant and shaky and a little messy, but real. So real that I felt it in my chest, deep and electric. And when I pulled back, he stayed there, eyes still closed, like he didn't want the moment to end. "Okay," he said again, voice quiet. That wasn't what I expected. I raised an eyebrow. "In a good way or a bad way?" He opened his eyes, smiled, not his usual smug, joking smile. Something else. "Good," he said. "Weird, but good." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. My heart was still hammering. We lay back down, facing each other now, our hands still tangled. The room had gone quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't loaded. It felt warm, easy, like whatever line we'd crossed had been waiting there all along. He didn't say anything else, just closed his eyes, his face inches from mine, and slowly, like he'd been doing it his whole life, he moved closer, until our foreheads touched. That was the moment I knew the night wasn't about confusion anymore. It was about permission. I didn't sleep much after that. I lay there with Ethan, eyes open, watching the shadow of his face and the faint glow coming through the blinds. His breathing had evened out, slow and deep, but he hadn't let go of my hand, and I couldn't stop replaying it all in my head. The way he looked at me right before the kiss. The weight of his fingers laced in mine. The tremble in his voice when he said, "I don't know, but I want to find out." Ethan. My best friend. The same guy who once drunkenly FaceTimed me from a frat party just to show me a dog someone brought. The guy who once asked me what moisturizer was and acted like I'd handed him a holy relic when I let him try mine. The guy who'd never once shown even the faintest sign he saw me as anything other than a friend. And now he was curled up next to me like we'd always belonged there. Around 4 a.m. he stirred. His grip on my hand tightened slightly, like his body remembered before his brain had caught up. "Hey," I whispered. He blinked a few times, turned his head toward me. He started, his voice hoarse. "Did we actually kiss, or was that just one of my weird dreams?" "We did," I said softly. "Oh," a pause. "And you're okay with that?" I smiled. "I wouldn't have kissed you if I wasn't." He nodded slowly, staring at the ceiling. "Right." Another silence fell. He didn't move away, but I could see his brain spinning, trying to catalog what this meant, what would come next. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," I said. "I know, it's just, I've never felt this before. Not with a guy. Not like this. He turned to me then, full on. And there was something raw in his expression, something I'd never seen on him before. Like vulnerability had cracked his armor open just enough to let the truth out. I liked it, he admitted. Those 3 words hit me harder than the kiss. Not because they were shocking, but because I could feel how scared he was to say them. I did too, I replied. A lot. He let out a breath, and it sounded like relief. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He reached out, placed his hand on my chest, light like he wasn't sure if he was allowed, and rested it there. I could feel the warmth of his skin through my t-shirt, the tentative weight of his palm over my heart. I can feel it, he said, voice barely audible. Your heartbeat. Yeah? I whispered back. It's fast. You're kind of a lot to process, I said, half laughing. He smiled, but it faded quickly. I don't want this to mess things up. It doesn't have to. But what if it does? I thought about that for a second. Thought about the years of friendship, the dumb jokes, the inside references only we got. And I realized something. We'll figure it out, I said. Even if it's messy, even if we don't know what we're doing. I'd rather figure it out with you than pretend this didn't happen. He nodded again. Then, slowly, he leaned in. Not for a kiss this time. Just to rest his forehead against mine, eyes closed. And that's how we stayed. No fireworks, no dramatic music. Just warmth, contact, trust. That moment, the stillness between breaths, was the first time I realized that maybe he wasn't as straight as he thought he was. And maybe he didn't want to be. The next morning hit like a bucket of cold water. Not because anything bad happened, nothing like that. But sunlight has a way of making the night before feel like a different life. And I could already feel the shift in the air as I blinked awake. Ethan was still next to me, but he'd rolled to the far side of the bed. His back was turned, his breathing light and careful, like he wasn't really asleep anymore but didn't know what to say yet. I stared at the ceiling, the warmth from our kiss and that weirdly perfect closeness still buzzing under my skin. Part of me wanted to just roll over and ask, so are we pretending last night didn't happen or? But I didn't. Instead, I slid out of bed, careful not to shake the mattress, and padded into the kitchen. I figured coffee might help, if not with the awkwardness, then at least with my pounding head. I was halfway through brewing a pot when I heard the soft creak of the bedroom door behind me. Ethan stood in the doorway, shirtless, one hand rubbing the back of his neck like he wasn't sure how to be in his own house. "Morning," I said, aiming for neutral. He nodded. "Hey." We stood there in silence, the coffee machine hissing between us. He scratched his jaw, eyes avoiding mine. "So, last night, here we go. You remember it?" "Yeah." His voice was quiet. "I remember all of it." I turned to face him fully. "You want to talk about it?" He walked slowly toward the counter, leaning against it like it could hold him up better than his legs could. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "That's okay." "I'm not." He hesitated, then shook his head. "I've never thought about guys that way. Not seriously. Not until lately." "Lately?" He finally looked at me. "You." That word hung in the air, like it had weight. "You've been on my mind," he said, voice lower now. More than I've admitted, I kept trying to explain it away. "You're my best friend. It's normal to feel close." That's what I told myself. I stayed quiet, letting him work through it. But it wasn't normal. Not the way I looked at you. Not the way I felt when you smiled at someone else. Or when you stayed over and I wanted to ask you to stay a little longer. He let out a dry laugh. "I thought maybe I was just lonely." or drunk, or confused. And now? Now, he paused, biting his lip. Now I think maybe I was scared. Of what? He met my eyes. Of wanting something I didn't know I was allowed to want. I felt my chest tighten. You are allowed, I said gently. You don't need to label anything. You just need to be honest, with me and with yourself. He nodded slowly. The coffee machine beeped. Neither of us moved. I liked kissing you, he said. It didn't feel wrong. That's good, I replied, because I liked it too. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, tentative but real. Can we take this slow? He asked. As slow as you need. Ethan stepped closer, his hand brushing mine on the counter. I'm not good at this, he said. I don't want to mess it up. You won't, I whispered. His fingers curled gently around mine, and just like that, the tension broke. Not with a dramatic gesture, but with something simple. A touch, a smile. A shared breath in a quiet kitchen, full of what-ifs and finallys. Whatever this was becoming, it wasn't just about that one night anymore. It was about everything that might come next. We didn't talk much the rest of that morning. Not because things were weird, but because it felt like we were both processing. Like we were walking through a doorway we hadn't known existed yesterday. Ethan was quieter than usual, but not in a shutdown way. More like he was paying attention, to me, to himself, to every moment that passed between us. We sat on the couch, side by side, each holding a mug of coffee, a show playing in the background that neither of us was actually watching. At one point, he shifted a little closer, our knees bumping. He didn't move away. I didn't either. By early afternoon, I started gathering my stuff, phone, keys, jacket. I hadn't planned to stay the whole day, and I figured he could use some space. But right as I was slipping on my shoes by the door, Ethan spoke up. You don't have to go yet. I turned. Yeah? He nodded, running a hand through his hair. Unless you want to. I paused. I don't. He took a slow breath. Good. I set my stuff back down and walked over, sitting beside him again. For a minute, we just stared at the paused screen on the TV, the last frame of whatever episode we hadn't paid attention to frozen in place. You know, this doesn't have to mean anything huge right away, I said quietly. We don't need to define it. You don't need to explain anything. He nodded. Yeah, but I want to. At least to you. I looked at him, surprised. I've never been scared of being seen before, he said. Not in the way I've been scared of you seeing this part of me. Why? Because once you see it, it's real. And it means something's different. That I'm different. Different doesn't mean bad. No, he agreed. But it means change. And change is hard when you've been so sure of who you were. I let his words settle. I didn't try to fix it or smooth it over. I just listened. After a moment, he shifted again, this time facing me fully. Can I ask you something kind of dumb? Sure. When you first figured out you were into guys, how did you know it wasn't just a phase? I smiled. Because it didn't go away. He nodded slowly. And when you kissed someone for the first time, it didn't feel wrong. Ethan looked at me like he was measuring that answer against what he was feeling. Then, almost shyly, he reached out and rested a hand on my thigh. It wasn't bold. It wasn't flirty. It was quiet and real. I want to kiss you again, he said, voice low. But this time not because it's late or because we're in bed or because it feels experimental. Okay, I said, my heart beating fast. He leaned in, more confident this time. Our lips met, warmer, deeper, slower, and there was nothing hesitant about it. His hand slid up to the side of my neck, fingers brushing just behind my ear like he already knew that spot would undo me. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "This doesn't make me gay," he said. "I know. I don't even know what it makes me." "You don't have to know," he nodded again. "But I know I don't want this to be the only time." That landed somewhere deep in my chest. We didn't make any big promises. We didn't lay out plans or put a label on what was happening. We just stayed there, close, quiet, new. And for the first time since I'd met him, I felt like Ethan was letting me see all of him. By the time the sun started going down, something between us had shifted again. Not in a dramatic way, just softer, like the tension had burned itself out and left something calmer in its place. Ethan wasn't pacing the edges of what he felt anymore. He was still figuring it out, yeah, but he wasn't afraid to sit in it with me. We ordered food, ate it on the couch like we always did, only this time, when our legs touched, he left them there. He didn't flinch when I leaned into him a little during the movie. His arm found its way around my shoulders in this easy, natural motion, and my head rested against his chest like we'd done it 100 times before, even though we hadn't. It was normal, weirdly normal, given what had happened less than 24 hours earlier. And when the credits rolled and neither of us moved, he broke the silence first. "You staying over again?" I looked at him. "You want me to?" Yeah, that was it. No hesitation, no joke to play it off. He got up and started pulling the blanket off the back of the couch like he was about to set it up for me, like before. I watched him for a second before speaking. "Hey." He turned. "You don't want me in your bed again?" He paused, eyes flicking to mine. Then he dropped the blanket and scratched the back of his neck, his signature tell whenever he wasn't sure how to say what he meant. "I do," he admitted. "I just didn't want to assume." "You can assume," I said, smiling a little. "This once." We climbed into his bed again, both of us in sweats and t-shirts, freshly brushed teeth, hair still damp from quick showers. It felt like any regular sleepover we'd had before, except now everything was different. Now there was no pretending. This time, he pulled me in first, his arm wrapped around my waist, chin brushing the top of my head. We didn't kiss right away. We didn't even talk. He just held me like it was instinct, like his body already knew how to fit with mine. "You feel safe," he whispered after a while, almost to himself. I tilted my head up. "Yeah?" "Yeah," he said. "Like I can stop overthinking everything when I'm like this." I wanted to say a million things in that moment, but I didn't. I just ran my fingers over the back of his hand, anchoring myself to the feeling of him next to me, the realness of it, and that's when he said it. I used to think I'd only ever be with girls, like that was just the way my life would go, no question. I stayed quiet, letting him talk, but now it's like something's clicked that I didn't know was missing before. I don't know what this is gonna look like. I just know I don't want to go back to pretending. I let that sink in. Then I whispered, "You don't have to." He pulled me closer. And in that dark, quiet room, we found something neither of us had been looking for when the night started. A version of each other that didn't exist before. One built from trust and tension, and something that felt dangerously close to falling, not just into each other, but into whatever this might become. The next morning felt different, not just because I woke up with Ethan's arm still around me, or because we'd barely moved all night. It was the way he looked at me when I opened my eyes, like he wasn't confused anymore, like he'd found something in the dark that made sense. We didn't rush to get up. We just lay there, slow and quiet, like neither of us wanted to break the spell. Eventually he whispered, "This feels easy with you." I looked at him. "Yeah," he nodded. "Easier than I thought it would." It wasn't some grand confession. It wasn't "I love you" or "I want to be with you." But it was something real. And coming from him, it meant more than anything else he could have said. Later, we went about the day like we always did. Laundry, errands, lazy scrolling on our phones, but something had settled between us. A comfort. A closeness. He started brushing up against me more, not in a nervous way, but in a claiming sort of way. Like he wanted the space between us to disappear. That night, we didn't even discuss where I was sleeping. He just pulled back the covers and waited for me. When we climbed into bed, this time we kissed first. No nerves, no testing the waters. Just lips on lips, slow and full of something that made my chest feel like it was expanding too fast. And then, his voice, quiet in the dark. "Can I try something?" My heart skipped. "What?" He looked nervous again, like maybe he was stepping too far. I want to see how it feels to, touch you." "A little," I held his gaze. "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah, I think so." His hand moved slowly, hesitant but warm. It rested low on my stomach, just under the hem of my shirt, his fingers brushing my skin like it was the first time he'd ever touched someone there. I inhaled sharply, not because it was too much, but because I'd wanted this for longer than I'd admitted, and now he was right here. I reached for him too, gently, mirroring his motion. We stayed like that, exploring the edge of something we hadn't dared talk about before. It was clumsy, tender, intimate, more about the trust than the touch. We didn't go too far, but we didn't need to. That was the night he let me touch him, hold him, feel his breath catch under my hand. It was the first time he let himself be vulnerable in a way he never had before, not with anyone. He looked at me afterward, eyes heavy but steady, and said, "This feels right. Not just the physical stuff, all of it." I pressed my forehead to his. "It does." "I'm scared though, I know. But I don't want to stop." "Then don't." He kissed me again. Longer this time, his hand in my hair, like he was memorizing every part of this. And I realized then, whatever label he used, whatever he figured out later, it didn't matter right now. What mattered was that he was here, letting me in, choosing this, choosing me. The next few weeks moved quietly, almost cautiously. Ethan didn't tell anyone, neither did I. Not because we were ashamed or hiding, but because whatever we were building didn't feel ready for the outside world yet. It was still growing, still delicate, like something that would fall apart if too many people poked at it. We didn't label anything. We didn't need to. Some nights I stayed over, some I didn't. But whenever I did, it was no longer just a sleepover. It was him pulling me close before we drifted off. It was sleepy conversations, whispered in the dark. It was his hand finding mine under the covers, or the way he'd nudge my ankle with his foot when he thought I was too far away. One night, a few weeks in, we were lying on his bed watching something dumb. One of those reality shows he pretended not to like but secretly got into. He was half on top of me, arm draped lazily across my chest. When he said it, I think I'd freak out less if I could explain what this is. I glanced at him. "You don't have to. Not for me." He nodded slowly. "I know. But I want to be able to. For myself." We were quiet for a minute. Then he added, "Maybe it's not about being straight, or not straight. Maybe it's just about you." That hit somewhere deep. "Do you want to tell people?" I asked, carefully. He didn't answer right away. "I don't know. I'm not scared of them knowing I'm with you," he said finally. "I'm scared of them trying to define it. I'm still figuring it out, and people love putting you in a box before you've even finished opening the damn thing." I laughed softly. "That's fair." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at me. "But I'm not hiding you. I don't want you to think that. I don't." "Good," he said, brushing a thumb across my cheek. "Because I think about you constantly. I miss you even when we're in the same room. And when I touch you, it feels like something inside me clicks into place." My throat went tight. "I'm not ready for a big announcement," he said, voice quiet. "But I'm ready to stop pretending you're just my friend." That was all I needed to hear. From that night on, we didn't worry so much about what it all meant. We just kept going. Grocery shopping, watching shows, holding hands when no one was looking. And sometimes, when it felt safe, even when people were looking. He never called himself anything. Not gay, not bi, not questioning. He was just Ethan. And I was the person he chose to figure it all out with. Not because he needed a label, but because he needed a person who wouldn't let him walk through it alone. That sleepover? It wasn't just the start of something. It was the moment we stopped living in the versions of ourselves we thought we had to be and started becoming the versions we didn't know we could be together.